My sister's boyfriend spent Thanksgiving insulting our family, claiming we were culturally inferior because we weren't Italian like him. So I made his own bloodline shame him. My sister's boyfriend Lorenzo came to Thanksgiving dinner and spent the entire meal explaining why our food was inferior to Italian cuisine. He picked up the turkey and said in Italy they'd never serve such dry meat because Italians understood moisture and flavor. He looked at our mashed potatoes and laughed, saying his nonna would cry if she saw us eating processed potatoes instead of handmade gnocchi. He actually took my grandmother's pumpkin pie, which she'd won county fair ribbons for, and said Americans didn't understand dessert because we hadn't grown up with proper Italian dolce. He kept saying we couldn't help being culturally inferior because we weren't blessed to be born Italian. My sister Amy sat there glowing like he was reciting poetry instead of insulting her entire family. Lorenzo refused to eat anything except bread, and even then he complained it wasn't real bread because real bread only came from Italian bakeries using ancient techniques passed down through generations. He told us about his family's villa in Tuscany that had been in their family for centuries, and how we'd never understand the connection to land and tradition that Italians had. He said his bloodline could be traced to Roman senators, and that Mediterranean genetics were scientifically superior for intelligence and creativity. My dad asked him what he did for work, and Lorenzo said he was between opportunities because American companies didn't appreciate the Italian approach to business, which was about relationships and style, not vulgar profit-seeking. Amy jumped in to say Lorenzo was too sophisticated for regular jobs and was waiting for the right position that honored his heritage. Lorenzo spent the rest of dinner teaching us Italian words incorrectly, saying we were pronouncing them wrong even though my cousin Maria spoke fluent Italian from her semester in Rome. When Maria corrected him, he said she'd learned tourist Italian, not the pure dialect his family spoke. He claimed his family owned vineyards and made wine that was served to the Pope, but Americans wouldn't understand because we drank beer like barbarians. He said his mother was personal friends with Armani, and his uncle invented a type of pasta that was served in Michelin star restaurants. Every story got more elaborate, and every comparison made us sound more pathetic for not being Italian. The next week, Lorenzo invited us to his apartment for what he called an authentic Italian feast to show us what real food tasted like. Amy begged us to come and support Lorenzo's cooking. We arrived to find Lorenzo had made spaghetti with jar sauce that he'd doctored with dried herbs. He served it on paper plates and called it rustic Italian style. He'd bought grocery store breadsticks and said they were grissini from his family's bakery. The salad was iceberg lettuce with bottled dressing he called his nonna's secret recipe. We all pretended it was amazing while Lorenzo lectured us about how we were finally experiencing true Italian culture. That's when I decided to do some research. Lorenzo's last name wasn't even Italian. It was actually Anderson, and he'd changed it on social media. His parents lived in Ohio and ran a hardware store. The villa in Tuscany was a vacation rental they'd stayed at once for 3 days. His nonna was very much alive and living in Cleveland, not making pasta in some Italian mountain village. I found her on social media, and she seemed lovely, posting recipes for Midwest casseroles and pictures from her church potluck. I reached out to her saying I was Amy's sister and would love to learn more about Lorenzo's family traditions. She was thrilled and immediately started talking about how Lorenzo had always been creative with stories since childhood. She said he'd been obsessed with The Sopranos in high school and started pretending to be Italian, even though they were Scottish and German. She was worried about his lying but thought it was harmless. I invited her to Sunday dinner without telling Lorenzo. When she walked in, Lorenzo went white. She hugged him and said in her thick Ohio accent how nice it was to meet Amy's family. Amy asked if this was the nonna from Italy, and Lorenzo's grandmother laughed, saying she'd never been to Italy in her life, but she'd love to go someday. She brought her famous green bean casserole and started telling stories about Lorenzo growing up in suburban Columbus, how he played Little League and was in the chess club. She showed pictures of teenage Lorenzo at Comic-Con dressed as Mario, saying he'd always loved Italian characters. She mentioned how his grandfather Anderson had fought in World War II and came back to start the hardware store that Lorenzo's dad now ran. Lorenzo kept trying to change the subject, but his nonna was on a roll. Full story on channel, link below.